Most scroll saw mistakes don't come from bad patterns, they come from rushing the cut. In this video, I'll show you why slowing down actually gives you cleaner corners, smoother curves, and fewer broken blades. Alright, I'll do something different and start with the easy part rather than do the difficult part first as I usually do. I'm cutting the oval base from 1/2-inch thick walnut using a number 5 Pegasus modified geometry blade. All you need to know to make this cut is to follow the line and let the blade do the work. On an easy cut like this, I tend to put extra pressure on the blade to speed it up, but all this does is possibly bend the blade, resulting in an uneven cut, or overheat it, causing the wood to burn or even break the blade. I'm cutting the top from 3/4 thick cherry, still using the number 5 blade. In the past I would have used a 7 or even a number 9 blade, but I'm making a conscious effort to retrain myself to use smaller sizes whenever it makes sense. A smaller blade can better navigate twists, turns, and acute angles. Since the purpose of this channel is to teach woodworking, not to say how fast I can produce items, I should be using the blade most appropriate for a beginner scroller. Also, my blade size choices are only suggestions, not unbreakable rules. Let me know in the comments whether you like to use the smallest blade possible, the largest, or something in between. I started cutting at the small heart on the upper left of the large heart. It's not a difficult cut, merely one of following the line and letting the blade do the work. There are 2 sharp turns at the bottom of this cut, and they're mirrored by 2 in the large heart, so I'll give some cutting tips when we get to that spot. The bottom of the small heart has 3 corners, and they'll require a bit of skill to cut cleanly. I cut from the pilot hole to one of the corners, and then I left the blade running in the curve just created while I swiveled the workpiece to the new cutting direction. The next section was a line with a slight curve, leading to another change of direction. I made this using the same procedure, stopped at the corner, swiveled the workpiece, then headed toward the next line. The cuts revealed a triangular shape with curved rather than straight sides. I decided to cut the word love next. I seem to like scroll saw patterns with lettering, and cutting letters on the scroll saw is a useful skill. Even if you only rarely cut letters, the same skills needed to cut them translate into techniques used to cut other shapes. To me, making elaborate interior cuts is what makes scroll saw projects so rewarding. I'm not sure what font Steve Good used when he designed this piece, but it's somewhat flowing, not blocky like a stencil font. The letter L can be very straight and angular, but this one is softened by the corners having more rounded turns rather than straight 90-degree turns. Curves are also easier to cut than sharp angles, and so that's a great benefit for those of us cutting this pattern. I cut from the pilot hole to the line and then just followed it. For soft curved corners, I just keep moving the workpiece when I come to one, rather than stopping for a short time while I swivel the workpiece for a sharp angled 90-degree corner. This font solves the problem of the O center by utilizing curved lines that are not connected at the top. The result is a shape instantly recognizable as the letter O without using a clunky stencil font. The letter V utilizes soft corners just like the L did. The little detail at the top makes the letter look more cursive than printed, using some elegance to the letter and the word. The letter E is in lowercase, as are all but the letter L. Again, there's a flow to this letter, which makes it easy to cut and pleasing to the eye. The font choice was important to the overall look of this item. Try to imagine what it would have looked like with a stencil font rather than what was used. It would have detracted significantly from the beauty of the curved heart and infinity symbol. With the letters done, I can return to the interior cuts that give the design shape. In a way, I think scroll sawing can be compared to sculpting in that they're both subtractive art forms. A sculptor starts with stone or other solid material and removes material until he is pleased with the final result. In scroll sawing, we start with a piece of wood and keep cutting pieces from it until we achieve the final result. I'm not sure where that comparison came from. It just popped into my head, and I thought I'd pass along the thought while it was there. These next 2 sections have what I think is a somewhat unusual construction. The lines are curved slightly, but the corners are sharp, not curved as they were in the letters. Notice how I made the first corner. I cut from the pilot hole to the intersection of the cut lines, then backed the blade to the pilot hole, swiveled the workpiece 180 degrees, and backed the blade to the intersection, dull side first. From that position, it was easy to make the turn in the direction I wanted to cut. I cut to the next intersection, but then I decided I could cut more efficiently by going counterclockwise rather than clockwise. So I used the saw blade curve I just created, made another 180-degree turn, moved the blade through the cut already made, and then made an easy left turn to the next cutting direction. At the end of that line, I had another easy left turn to the final side of this triangle. I followed that line, reached the point where I'd stopped before, and that cutout was complete. For the next shape, I started in the same manner, backing out of the corner to the pilot hole, pivoting, and backing into the corner once again. I cut to the next corner, stopped briefly to pivot the workpiece, then started cutting in the new direction. I cut the next corner in the same manner, followed the cut line, and made the last turn using the same technique as the previous two before following the final line for this cut. In case you haven't totally internalized this yet, I'd like to summarize the two techniques for cutting corners. If a corner is curved, you don't need to stop pushing the workpiece. Keep it moving and use your hands to keep the workpiece on the line. If the corner is sharp, such as 90 degrees, then cut right to the intersection, stop, but leave the blade running. Pivot the workpiece to the new cutting direction, as the blade has to move in the curve just created. Plus it may nibble a bit away from the waist area while the workpiece is moving. That is the corner turning process in a nutshell. The remaining interior cuts are very much like the two previous sections. The lines creating the overall shape are curved, but the corners are sharp angles. These present an opportunity for a newbie to learn the skills needed for scroll sawing, and a different opportunity for experienced scrollers to hone their skills. I don't have any new tips for these, just follow the ones I've already given. The only machining left is the external cut. I started with the bottom that will be glued to the oval base. I attached the pattern to the bottom against the edge of the wood because I knew it was a flat surface. It was a short trip to the curve that changed the cut from vertical to horizontal, then a relatively long straight line which led to a sharp corner. I made this one by backing into the curve just created, using the curve plus the waist area to flip the workpiece 180 degrees, and then backing the blade into the corner, dull side first. Now only a small movement is needed to align the wood with the next cutting direction. The next direction change has an extra step. To emphasize the separation between the heart and the infinity symbol, the cut extends slightly into the sideways figure 8. I cut to the end of the line, backed up that short distance, and then I made the turn onto the infinity symbol. The cut then took me around some gentle curves until I reached the small heart on top of the large heart. This was not a difficult angle to cut, but it did require a brief stop at the intersection so I could pivot the workpiece slightly. I just thought of this, but when it comes to making corners, think of the word stop to go along with sharp corner. You need to stop in order to make a sharp corner, but you can just go if you want to make a curved corner. There are lots of curves in those two letters, so that might be a good way to remember this. I used a piece of sandpaper to soften the edges on the top and bottom of the oval stand, very lightly on the bottom and a little more on the top. I could have used the router table to place a round over on the top, but this piece is small and somewhat thin, so it made me nervous to think of running that through the router. One of my shop rules is to never perform an operation that makes me even slightly nervous. I think it's a good rule to have, and an even better one to follow. You couldn't ask for an easier glue up. I used my smallest applicator bottle to apply a bead of glue to the bottom of the display, then spread it around with my fingertip. I'm using Tight Bond white glue, which is water-based, dries clear, and cleans up with soap and water only. I centered the piece on the base, and then I set it aside while I applied glue to the second piece. I set the second piece aside as well, and let the glue cure a bit before I returned and added 2 clamps to each of them. Once the glue is fully cured, I'll take these to my finishing room and apply several coats of warm satin Minwax spray polyurethane. If this video helped clarify how to handle corners and curves on the scroll saw, give it a thumbs up. It helps the channel more than you might think. If you have your own approach to blade sizing or corner cuts, leave a comment below. I read and respond to them all, and your experience helps other scrollers learn too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next project.